welcome to this explainer. Today we're doing a deep dive into something that is just profoundly devastating and honestly widely misunderstood. We're talking about the psychology of betrayal. We're going to bridge that massive gap between raw human heartbreak and the actual hard clinical science of how our brains process these profound violations of trust. We'll be looking at the whole spectrum, from broken marriages right up to failing institutions, all to truly understand the invisible wounds that betrayal leaves behind.
Okay, let's just jump right into the raw emotion of this with a pretty haunting quote. The saddest thing about betrayal is that it always comes from the people you love. This line actually comes from a heartbreaking Reddit post in a community called Surviving Infidelity. It was written by a wife who literally just discovered her husband's infidelity on the very night of their 20th wedding anniversary. To give you a little more context here, this woman wrote a letter to her husband expressing the unimaginable pain of having 2 decades of life together just thrown away, in her words, like trash. Her entire reality was completely turned upside down while he was away on a business trip. And what's really fascinating about this from a psychological standpoint is the advice she got from the online community. Commenters urgently warned her against doing what they call the pick-me dance. If you haven't heard that term, it's basically a desperate attempt to win back a cheater's affection. It's an instinct a lot of us might recognize when faced with losing a relationship, right? But as the commenters pointed out, you're never going to win by undermining your own value.
Section 1. Betrayal Trauma Theory Explained.
So, transitioning from that deeply personal letter, we need to understand why this specific type of pain fundamentally breaks our brains. To do that, we look at betrayal trauma theory. This was originally introduced by psychologist Jennifer Freyd back in 1994. She defined betrayal trauma as a trauma perpetrated by someone with whom the victim is close to and reliant upon for support and survival. The absolutely crucial takeaway here is that this isn't just sadness or even general grief. It's a highly distinct psychological violation. Think about it. When the person you literally rely on for safety becomes the person harming you, it creates this massive cognitive conflict. It's like the fire department showing up to your house, but instead of putting out the fire, they start spraying gasoline on it. That is exactly what your brain is trying to process.
And this brilliantly illustrates John Bowlby's famous attachment theory from way back in 1969. On one side, we've got a secure internal working model. This is your secure mind, expecting its needs to be met by a caregiver or a partner. But on the other side, we have the disorganized model. In the context of betrayal, this develops when your caregiver or partner is simultaneously the solution you need and the source of your fear. Your brain simply doesn't know what to do with that paradox. It gets caught right between the biological drive to seek comfort from this person and the terrifying reality that this exact same person is the threat.
Which brings us to a really profound question. Why does our brain actually hide our own trauma? In that Reddit story we just talked about, the wife found evidence of an affair that had been going on since early in the year, yet she didn't see the signs for months. So why might a victim just completely ignore glaring red flags?
Well, the answer lies in what researchers call dissociation and betrayal blindness. Evolutionary psychology suggests that humans have these built-in cheater detectors to sense when social contracts are broken. But betrayal trauma theory posits that if you are dependent on the abuser, your brain will actively suppress those detectors. So ignoring the trauma isn't some sign of weakness. It's actually a profound evolutionary survival mechanism. It is quite literally designed by your own mind to compartmentalize psychological pain so you can maintain an attachment that you subconsciously believe you need to survive.
Ultimately, this all leads to what researchers call the loss of the assumptive world. A researcher named Jennifer Bowlman identified that we all walk around with these core assumptions that the world is benevolent, meaningful, and fair. It's like the invisible foundation of your daily life, right? The core belief that the ground isn't going to just suddenly give way beneath you. Betrayal absolutely shatters those assumptions. Just like the Reddit user whose 20-year marriage turned out to be a lie, the victim realizes the secure world they assumed they lived in never actually existed at all.
Section 2. When institutions betray us.
Zooming out from intimate partners and caregivers for a second, what happens when the very systems and institutions designed to protect us become the abusers? Well, this is known as institutional betrayal. This happens when an institution fails to prevent or respond appropriately to wrongdoings by others. So, when victims go to the legal, medical, or mental health systems for help and they're met with disbelief, blame, or even a cover-up, just to protect the institution's reputation, it acts as a devastating second assault. This total lack of validation drastically exacerbates the effects of that initial trauma. It leaves the person feeling completely and utterly isolated. And the scope of institutional betrayal across our society is just massive. We see it in academic institutions that mishandle campus assaults and end up punishing the whistleblowers. We see it in the military, where reporting an assault might disrupt unit cohesion or ruin a career. And crucially, we see it in the fundamental systems of our society, like law enforcement, where a history of excessive force and brutality deeply impacts marginalized groups and the mentally ill. When the very people authorized to keep the peace end up breaking it, the psychological damage is profound. We even see it in the healthcare system. Adverse medical experiences or having your symptoms dismissed can fundamentally break a patient's trust in the physicians who are literally sworn to do no harm.
Section 3. The psychological fallout.
So, whether the betrayal is intimate or institutional, what is the clinical aftermath of all this? The clinical consequences of this suppressed energy are pretty staggering. Because the victim is so often forced to suppress their awareness of the trauma just to survive, that unaddressed energy manifests as severe clinical psychopathology. We're talking about PTSD and dissociative identity disorder, where the mind literally fractures into altered states just to cope with the paradox. It drives substance use disorders as a form of self-medication, it's heavily linked to borderline and narcissistic personality disorders, and remarkably, recent research even links severe childhood betrayal trauma to the schizophrenia spectrum. The betrayal is so utterly destabilizing, it can actually trigger psychotic episodes and hallucinations, fundamentally breaking a person's tether to reality. On top of all that, a mother's unresolved betrayal trauma can impact her ability to create a safe environment, meaning these effects can literally be passed down intergenerationally. Connecting this clinical fallout back to the context of romantic betrayal, we see profound damage in cases involving intimate partner violence and domestic abuse. When someone is repeatedly degraded by a partner they trust, it creates these incredibly deep feelings of shame, anxiety, and low self-esteem. And this repeated degradation creates immense barriers to forming any new romantic attachments in the future. The victim is left absolutely terrified to ever let their guard down or trust anyone ever again.
Section 4. Assessment and Healing.
Okay, so having looked at the sheer profound damage betrayal causes, how do psychological professionals even begin to measure this invisible damage? Well, they rely on specific tools based on age and context. The Betrayal Trauma Inventory, or BTI, is a comprehensive 45-minute assessment targeting events before age 16. If time is short, the Brief Betrayal Trauma Survey uses just 11 items to quickly evaluate events prior to age 18. And for those macro-level violations we talked about, the Institutional Betrayal Questionnaire helps identify exactly how an institution, like a college campus or a hospital, was involved in normalizing or covering up the abuse.
Now, once assessed, healing is possible. Traditional symptom-focused treatments are making way for highly tailored approaches like relational cultural therapy. Since the injury occurred directly within a relationship, the healing really has to focus on repairing those relational disconnections rather than just, pathologizing the victim's symptoms. In the realm of addiction psychology, experts like Patrick Carnes focus specifically on breaking and healing what they call exploitive betrayal bonds. This means untangling the victim's own sense of worth from the abuser's toxic actions. It's all about helping the survivor realize that the betrayal was a reflection of the betrayer, not some kind of defect in themselves.
We've definitely covered a lot of clinical ground today, but I want to conclude this explainer by looping right back to where we started. In her letter, that heartbroken Reddit wife told her husband, "You want to chase the fantasy of what could be instead of cultivating what you have." It's a beautifully powerful guarding metaphor, and it just perfectly captures the tragedy of betrayal. So I'll leave you with this provocative question to consider. In your own life, are you cultivating what you have, or are you risking your entire assumptive world for a fleeting fantasy? Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and keep learning.